and I'll tell you, a lot of experts that I've had even on my show will tell you that community is literally the game changer for men, but it has to be the right men, the right community, because if it's not, you could go the other direction. Right. And no one, I tell this to my boys all the time. I'm like, if you hang out with, like, so my 17-year-old plays football. My oldest is a wrestler. I was like, if you hang out with football players that have the same vision you do, in other words, I'm going to go kick my ass in the gym. I'm going to put on as much size and strength as I possibly can. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to do drugs. I'm going to eat right, because this is what I am. This is my direction. This is where I'm going. And if you hang out with people who are doing drugs, who are drinking, who are flunking out of school, eventually you're going to be one of them. Right. So when it comes to us as men, that circle of friends is the exact same thing. And I actually think it's our responsibility as dads that one of the most powerful things that we can do is show our kids, like my son on this 3.5 hour trip, he brought up a friend of his that is into really, he's reckless, absolutely reckless. Like, this kid, goes 120 miles an hour on the highway, smokes weed all the time, dropped out of wrestling, and he desperately wants to be friends with my son. And he's like, what do I do about that? And I was like, well, first of all, I was like, do you see me hanging out with people like that? Do you see me hanging out with knuckleheads? He's like, no. I was like, that's because there are certain relationships that you have to keep out here. Like, I don't want any part of that. Like, I'll be nice to you. Like, if that's your life, that's your life. If that's what makes you happy, great. You're not my people. On the flip side, I want to be around men who have a mission. I want to be around guys who have a vision. I want to be around guys who want to grow and be more and do more and all of these different things, right? And I'm not going to get that by hanging out with the dudes that I went to college with and got drunk with every weekend, right? Now, I will say this. Those guys are still a lot of fun, and I'll hang out with them like 3 times a year, but they're not like my go-to, my ride or die tribe, right? That's dangerous in my world. Like, that's not the direction I'm headed. And if I hang out with people like that, that is the direction we're going to head, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's like if you hang out with 5 smokers, you'll be the 6th. If you hang out with 5 gym goers, you'll be the 6th. It's human nature to kind of conform to your circle, whatever that circle is. And what I've found to be the only way for a man to ensure that he has the actual, like, kind of strength of character to hold those boundaries, because in a lot of ways our modern culture has convinced men that if you dare hold a boundary, you're toxic, right? And that's kind of insane, and that would be a whole separate episode if we broke that down. But the only way to really define it is for yourself internally, right? And so the number one way is you have to define that long-term vision, like you said. What are you actually working towards? That's your destination. And if you can't even describe that for yourself, then how on earth are you going to decide today of, like, nope, that thing doesn't get me closer to the vision for my family or for me, my legacy, right? That kind of end state destination has to be clear to you, at least in some of the core elements, right? Obviously, life's going to happen and there's going to be tons of twists and turns throughout that journey. But having that defined end state is where you can then kind of in the day-to-day decide for yourself, no, I don't need this and I don't need that, and that guy's bad for me, and whatever. And then you have to define your personal values. And if you're unwilling to do those things for yourself, then how on earth are you going to hold a boundary? Because boundaries are just a reflection of kind of that inner presence, really. And that's the thing I just want to encourage all the men out there is holding a boundary does not make you a hateful or judgmental person. And in fact, judgment is a word that's been kind of co-opted as well. There's a difference between judging someone and condemning them, right? So judging is I'm assessing your character, I'm assessing what you're bringing to the table or what your lifestyle is like, and then I'm going to decide whether or not I want to allow that into my space. I'm not going to go preach at you and manipulate you or whatever, or condemn you, but I'm also going to hold a healthy boundary of like, hey man, I know you like to do that kind of stuff, but I don't do that, and we just need to go our separate ways or whatever. And that's what men need to do. And unfortunately, I've seen in my experience, a lot of men are so afraid of holding basic boundaries with just day-to-day people, not even like close relationships. And and it's really harming more than just themselves. It's their families, right? Because if you can't even hold a boundary for yourself, how are you going to flex that kind of wall on things that should be kept away from your family, or influences from your family and your children and things like that? So just wanted to kind of like highlight that. And I love the way you walk through that, because it's a very important element. Whether you're a teenage boy or a grown man, you've got to really kind of cultivate that right circle for yourself, because it will really determine your long-term success, however you define success. I know Brandon has a question for you too now, so I'll pass it over to him.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so important to have the right people in our circle. And I think for our children, one of the most important people we have to have in that circle is the dad, right? They have to have their father present there, having the finger on the pulse, knowing what their kid's life is and where their kid wants to go with it, so they can help guide them, right? And have core principles that you teach them, so that way they can create their own vision of their own life, right? Because, I always say that whatever we don't teach our children, the world is going to brutally teach them later. And, that's my job and my responsibility is to protect that. And so, core principles are really important. And I talk about them a lot with my son and even with my daughter. So my question to you is, if you could narrow down like your teachings to 3 core principles of good fatherhood, what would they be and why?
Whew. That's a big question. So ours is obviously personal to us, but ours is, first of all, are you talking about fatherhood core principles, or just how our family operates?
Yeah, well, just core principles that you teach, in the dad edge or to your kid, right? I mean, just anything that you apply that you feel is like at the heart of what a man should be.
Yeah. So, with us, number one is our faith. Like that's a foundational thing for us. And I always tell my kids, I'm like, hey, I'm your earthly father, but you have a heavenly father, right? And my job is to help you get to know him really well, right? So we pursue our faith relentlessly. Kind of interesting conversation I just had with my 11-year-old. So like I always try to like stair step the faith type of conversations to where they can understand them. And my 2 older boys very much into their faith. My 11 and 9-year-old, they're kind of like, they understand some of it. But I had a conversation with my 11-year-old. I always like to ask really deep questions with my kids, and I was sitting with him and I was sitting on the side of his bed as he's laying down one night, and this is just a couple of weeks ago. And I asked him, I said, "What's your biggest fear?" And I thought he was going to say like skydiving or something like that, right? And he goes, and without even hesitating, he said, "My biggest fear is I die, I go to heaven, and God tells me I have to go to hell." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, just out of curiosity, like, why do you feel that way? He's like, "I don't know." He's like, I just don't know if what I'm doing is the right thing. And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I was like, what if we have better conversations? Like, it's time. Like, it's definitely time for you and I to really help you explore this relationship with God. I was like, what if we start doing that? And he's like, yeah. So, and we're doing that now. So, which is great. We're watching The Chosen together. We have conversations around it. I bought him what's called the Epic Bible, which is kind of like it's like a graphic novel of the Bible, but it's really digestible for them. And so that's number one, is faith. Number 2 is connection, deep human connection with our family. So we are not we do not have surface level relationships in this family, and we also have we also have a desire to formulate other connections with other people in our lives, like that, friends and other relatives and that kind of thing. But the deep human connection is, hey, we're not going to go on autopilot. Like, we're not going to be a family that just is sitting on the couch next to each other in each other's space on devices. We're going to have conversations. We're going to have laughter. We're going to make this house and this family a place where you want to be, not feel like you have to be. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of things I do wrong as a dad and a lot of mistakes I've made, but that one, I think we've done really, really well, because what I've noticed is now that, and I feel like we have to pinch ourselves sometimes. And again, my life is not sunshine and rainbows. I'm not trying to paint this like perfect picture, because it's not. It's like every day there's bad moments, of course. But like at the end of the day, like the one thing that's really cool about our kids in our house is they actually want to be here. So much so that they not just want to be here and in their rooms with their door closed, but they're actually upstairs on the couch with us. And my 18-year-old came home from wrestling practice the other night, and he just like came and sat on the couch with us. And I looked at him, I go, I get the feeling you just really like being at home. And he looks at me, he goes, and without hesitating, goes, I love being at home. He's like, it's so comfortable here. He's like, it's like a place where no matter what's going on, like I can be here. And I was just like for me to hear that, I'm like, man, I guess we're doing like a couple things right. If my 17-year-old is the exact same way. He's more of a homebody than my 18-year-old is. So I'm just like, man, like look at that. Like, so deep human connection within our family is something that is really, really important to us. Another one is this: experiences and doing life together over possessions. And I know I'm not really hitting characteristic things, but like things that are really important and meaningful in our family that helps us keep a bond super tight. And what does that look like? That looks like, well, you know what? We don't have nice cars in this family. We really don't. Like, we could go out and buy some nice cars. I don't want to buy a nice car because we have 4 boys that tear them up, right? The other thing, too, is you probably won't find any of us wearing designer clothes, designer shoes, but you will see us, you know, putting resources towards experiences like, let's go on a cool vacation together. I'm not talking about like anything crazy like, oh, we're going to do like a 21-day trip to Europe. I'm not talking about that, but I am talking about like, let's go experience life together. And adventure is a big one in our family. So we can do life together as an adventure. So that's another big one.